What do you want to go through them first?
Weimar.
Okay. Okay. All of them?
Yeah.
Okay. You tell me when you're ready and I'll start. Do you need to record it?
It is recording.
Is it?
Yep.
Hi everyone. Right. Okay, obviously when the thing goes off I'll be telling Natalie extra information, so... Yeah, serves you all right. Okay, Weimar. The main thing about Weimar is that there are three phases to Weimar history. There's the years of chaos up to 1924. There's 24 to 28, recovery or not, and then there's the nightmare from 1929 onwards. Okay. Now, what they're really going to ask you, the broad themes are going to be these. In terms of that first period, which is chaos, they're likely to ask you, what was the biggest problem? Why were there big problems? Was it a problem? For Weimar 24 to 29, they're either going to ask you, why did it recover? Assuming it did. Or they'll ask you, how far did it recover? And for 29 onwards, it's about, why did Weimar fail? So if we're looking at what you need to know about the years of chaos, the first thing you need to know is about the impact of the First World War. You need to know about the political, social and economic impact of the First World War. The political impact is political chaos or revolution, but with lots of right-wingers feeling very alienated. There's not actually that much political change. There's only political change at the top. Socially, there is huge social upheaval and there's economic chaos, all of which comes together in many ways in the Treaty of Versailles. The Treaty of Versailles is devastating for Germany. It's devastating for Germany in the short run, it's devastating for Germany in the long run. It's devastating for Germany in the short run because of the impact of the reparations, for example. Reparations and the Treaty of Versailles are hated by most Germans, and particularly hated by right-wingers. And Weimar is doomed from the moment it accepts the Treaty of Versailles. But what else can it do? Remember, the Treaty of Versailles comes on the back of what is already chaos. So you've already got a constitution set up in early 1919. And that is set up in the town of Weimar because the government has fled Berlin because of the Spartacist revolt. Don't make the mistake of thinking the Spartacists occurred after the Treaty of Versailles. They didn't. They occurred early in 1919 in that whole chaos after the end of World War I. Okay? So you've got to bear in mind that you've got the Weimar Constitution. The Weimar Constitution is too democratic for its own good. It has too much power at a local level, which can undermine the government in Berlin. You have proportional representation, which means coalition governments. You have too much power for the president as well. All of those things put together, Article 48, for example, all of those things put together mean political instability. It's an idealistic constitution with massive flaws, as the period from 1929 onwards shows. Now, if you're looking at challenges to Weimar, if I'm looking at the useful revision checklist, the topics we will cover, there are the communist revolts. Communist revolts because it's mainly the Spartacist revolt in Berlin, but there are other minor ones like in Munich and places like that as well. The Spartacists, to be honest, have never got a hope in hell. Most Germans are anti-communist, they are badly led, they don't have a clear agenda, they won't work with the Social Democrats. The Spartacists are going down. Their two main characters are Karl Liebknecht and Rosa Luxemburg, and they are the nearest thing that the Spartacists have to a leader, and even they disagree with the Spartacists. Okay? The Spartacists are crushed by the Freikorps, who are vigilante squads of ex-soldiers. Who calls on them? Friedrich Ebert, who is the first leader of Weimar. Why does he use the Freikorps? Because Germany is in chaos and the Freikorps hate the communists. However, from that moment onwards, you could argue democracy is doomed, or at least Weimar is doomed, because the communists from now on will never compromise, because they will never forgive Ebert and the Social Democrats for using the Freikorps to crush the Spartacists. Okay? So, in a sense, the Spartacist revolt is insignificant in its own right, but its consequences are very significant. The Kapp Putsch is incredibly significant. The Kapp Putsch is more serious. Yes, it's chaotic. Yes, the Kapp Putsch is a joke in many ways. But at the same time, the Kapp Putsch is a right-wing threat in a right-wing country. The Kapp Putsch is triggered by the Treaty of Versailles, remember. The Treaty of Versailles doesn't just have the problems of hyperinflation. Most people, if they're asked about the Treaty of Versailles, go, oh yeah, it caused hyperinflation because of reparations. Yes, it did. But it also caused the Kapp Putsch because the need to cut the army to 100,000 men meant that Ebert needed to get rid of the Freikorps. He needed to get rid of them as part of the cuts. But the Freikorps were going nowhere, and emboldened by the fact that they crushed the Spartakists and felt they were needed, they march on Berlin. The government flees again. It's not fleeing to Weimar, but it flees again. It's brought down by people power, the Freikorps, the Kapp Putsch, because Berlin is a relatively left-wing city, and whilst people might be right-wing, they don't want a military dictatorship, and Berlin was never on their side. So there's a general strike and there's chaos. Okay? But what you have to bear in mind about the Kapp Putsch is the Kapp Putsch is destroyed, but a lot of those vigilantes simply filter back, almost drain back into German life and become murder squads and murder people like Rathenau, who was the German foreign minister. If you're thinking, who's that? He's just a random named example I'm giving you. Okay? Nobody was safe because of that. So the Kapp Putsch is incredibly significant, and it comes back to the Treaty of Versailles. You also have the invasion of the Ruhr, which is in 1923. Now, the invasion of the Ruhr by the Belgians and the French. Why? Because the Germans aren't keeping up with their reparations payments. They only made one reparations payment, then defaulted on the second, and so the French and the Belgians marched in, as the Treaty of Versailles said they could, to nick stuff from the industrial heartland of the Ruhr. The German government responds with a policy of passive resistance. It tells the people to do nothing. And that's absolutely stupid in many ways, because it means that they're not earning wages, it means that they're not paying taxes, it means the government's even more skinned. So it's a sort of very limited gesture. So you again have this political paralysis. The government shows itself to be weak, because what can it do? Basically tell the people to do nothing. The government doesn't like the Treaty of Versailles, but it works on the principle that it has to accept the Treaty of Versailles, because otherwise it's going nowhere. It will just get invaded again and again and again. Okay? The invasion of the Ruhr leads to a lack of money, because no money is being produced. Therefore, the German government prints more money. Therefore, you get hyperinflation. Hyperinflation causes economic collapse. Okay? Hyperinflation affects the whole of Germany, not just the Ruhr. Hyperinflation shows how weak the German government is. And Stresemann, for example, later will know that and says, look, we've got to do a deal to get money because we've got no money. It causes social chaos because there's massive homelessness, there's massive poverty, all of these things, and it causes massive economic collapse, including for the Mittelstand, the middle classes, who see their savings wiped out. Okay? Everybody is in despair at hyperinflation. Hyperinflation caused by printing more money because of the invasion of the Ruhr because of the Treaty of Versailles, the Treaty of Versailles because of the First World War. Okay? So you get the invasion of the Ruhr, you get hyperinflation. Into this chaos, Hitler tries to seize his opportunity, and you get the Munich Putsch. So the Munich Putsch is caused by the chaos of 1923, which is caused by hyperinflation, which is caused by the invasion of the Ruhr, which is caused by reparations, which is caused by the Treaty of Versailles. The Munich Putsch is a farce. The Munich Putsch is badly organised, but let's be honest, the Munich Putsch could get Ludendorff, the World War I general, on side. The Munich Putsch could try and seize power in Munich because of the fragmented political system in Germany. The Munich Putsch was a joke, but it existed, and remember, Hitler was then let off with a light sentence, which shows how fundamentally right-wing and unstable the democracy of Germany was. Okay? The Munich Putsch isn't really a serious threat, but its very existence is a serious threat. Okay? The man who saves the day is Gustav Stresemann. Gustav Stresemann does a number of things. Okay? Gustav Stresemann calls off passive resistance. Passive resistance means that the French and Belgians are willing to leave. Passive resistance means that Stresemann, while seeming unpopular with some people, has done the pragmatic thing. He's got the French and Belgians to leave. And until you get the French and Belgians to leave, you can't get the economy back on track. He also scraps the old worthless Reichsmark and replaces it with the temporary Rentenmark, pending the the new Reichsmark, which will be the new currency. He stabilises the currency situation with the temporary Rentenmark. Okay? Both of these things are reassuring the international community that Stresemann can be trusted. And people like the Americans start to say Stresemann's a man we can do business with, hence why they'll give him the Dawes Plan. But what Stresemann also does is this. Stresemann moves against left-wing regional governments. Because Germany is a federal system, there are certain left-wing local governments. Some local governments are right-wing. Munich's was quite right-wing, but not right-wing enough. Bavaria, sorry. But Saxony, for example, and Thuringia had quite left-wing governments. Now, Stresemann moves against them. Why? Because he always feels there'll be a thorn in his side, and that helps persuade the army to support him. And so when Hitler rises up, the army are happy to back Stresemann because they say, look, Stresemann's our kind of guy. He doesn't like left-wingers either. We don't need to back Hitler. Stresemann's okay. Okay? Bringing political stability helps create social stability. Stresemann is the one man that you could argue the middle class trust. Stresemann is right-wing. Stresemann is a nationalist. Stresemann hates the Treaty of Versailles. But Stresemann realises you can't keep fighting and pushing back against the Treaty of Versailles. Stresemann's attitude is, we get the best results by doing deals. Okay? And the proof is Stresemann gets the Dawes Plan. Stresemann gets essentially a financial rescue package from the Americans. Yes, they are loans. Yes, they are short-term loans. So yes, Stresemann says we're dancing on a volcano. But the money is crucial in helping to stabilise Germany. However, the recovery of 24 to 28 is therefore based on somebody else's money and is totally superficial. For some people he's a genius, but for people like Hitler, the Dawes Plan is basically a way of accepting that reparations need paying. Okay? The other way so that's the chaos up to 1924. Stresemann saves the day 1923 to 24. Yeah? So that's the first phase, and you need to think of it very much like that. Remember, there's been total economic collapse. Total economic collapse 1919 to 23, 24. You've also got the devastating impact of the Treaty of Versailles, the devastating impact of World War I. The biggest economic problem in many ways is hyperinflation. But hyperinflation comes off the back of earlier economic chaos. The Treaty of Versailles is devastating. It's amazing that Germany survives, and you could credit Stresemann, you could credit the Americans. If I had to choose, I'd probably choose Stresemann out of the two. Why? Because the Americans would only lend money because Stresemann got them on side. Stresemann is a gifted politician. He's also one of the few people who middle class people will trust. So they say, yeah, it's all gone wrong, but maybe with Stresemann there's hope for the future. Okay? Now, what you have to bear in mind is that the next phase of German history is called Stresemann and the Golden Years. Now, this is about did Germany recover or not in the years 1924 to 29. Politically, and if you ever get a question about did Germany recover, you either go yes, no, conclusion, or political yes, no, social economic, yes, no, conclusion. Okay? Politically, there appears to be recovery. The Nazis are a tiny party. The Communists are a tiny party. Many of the votes go to democratic supporting parties like Stresemann's DMVP and the Social Democrats. Democracy seems to work. However, politically Germany does not recover because Stresemann is voted in as president. Therefore, when the people directly speak, they vote for the old World War I war hero. And the Communists and the Nazis are still there, clinging on. What did I say? Stresemann. Sorry, Hindenburg is voted in as president in 1925. Okay? Stresemann is only Chancellor for a very short time, around 1923-24. His government falls like everybody else's government falls, but he's usually in the government between 1923 and 1929, and as long as he's somewhere there, he's okay. But let's be honest, when the German people were asked to choose a leader, they voted for Hindenburg. I mean, that's not a sign of everything that's wrong with democracy. I don't know what is. Okay? Hindenburg is no fan of democracy. He asks the Kaiser's permission to become president. The Kaiser, who has fled Germany. Right? Socially, does Germany recover? Well, if you look at German society, you have Bauhaus, you have jazz, you have Berlin, you have cabaret, you have modern art, you have creativity, you have jazz music. However, for many Germans, this is a load of scum. This is modern nonsense. This is foreign nonsense. And people like the Van der Vogel tap into that. You would almost say there's a divide between metropolitan Berlin and everyday rural Germany. The Van der Vogel are those people who want to basically play guitars and sing German songs whilst wearing leather shorts. Okay? Eventually the Nazis will tap into that sentimentality. Okay? Politically as well, foreign policy-wise, you could argue that yes, Germany has recovered. They have got the Dawes Plan, which later is extended to include the Young Plan. Now, the Young Plan is always forgotten. That's 1928-29, the Young Plan. And the Young Plan extends the reparations period, extends the loans even further. It's blown out of the water by the Great Depression. Okay? You've also got Locarno signed, the Locarno Treaty, which people might remember from GCSE. Locarno was where Germany said we accept the Treaty of Versailles, and therefore they were allowed into the League of Nations. However, in terms of foreign policy, accepting the Locarno Treaty and joining the League of Nations was hated by many right-wingers, and they saw the Dawes Plan and the Young Plan as basically tying Germany to American bankers. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Economically, Germany appears to recover. Industrial production increases. Unemployment shrinks. Wages go up. The standard of living goes up, linked in with that. However, it is all based on somebody else's money, and the recovery is uneven. Small businesses struggle and farmers struggle. The rural economy really is struggling big time, which helps explain why the tiny support the Nazis have is often concentrated in rural regions, where they don't like the modern art and they haven't seen the economic recovery. So on balance, did Germany recover? It seemed to recover, and compared to where it was amazing, but it was all superficial, and the way it came crashing down so quickly in 1929 shows that the recovery was not substantial. Okay? Does that make sense? Yeah?
Yes.
Okay? So you have to bear in mind, they've got foreign loans, they appear to have political stability, there appears to be economic recovery, improvements to working and living conditions, but it's all superficial. Wages go up, living standards improve, but not for everyone. Pardon me. Then you have the impact of the Great Depression. Okay?
Yeah.
1929, unemployment soars. Millions unemployed. I will not mention the statistic now. I expect everybody to know the statistic of how many are unemployed by 1932. Clue, it's in the millions. Clue, then it's either 3 or 6 million. Maybe it's 96 million if you're really dumb. But millions are unemployed remarkably quickly. The impact of the Great Depression is political, social and economic. Politically, the Grand Coalition of 1928, Muller's Grand Coalition, collapses. It collapses because it cannot agree what to do about the Great Depression and the effects of the Great Depression, particularly unemployment benefit. Muller's own party walks out of his coalition, the SPD walk out, because they say you can't cut unemployment benefit, and he says we've got to. There are millions unemployed and we've got no taxes coming in. Because remember, that's the double whammy about the Great Depression. It increases demands for unemployment benefit and it decreases the amount of tax being paid, which would cover unemployment benefit. So you have massive political chaos. Muller's Grand Coalition is replaced at Hindenburg's behest by Brüning. Brüning tries to implement austerity policies where you have very low spending and very high taxes. Brüning is doing the sensible economic thing, but it is massively unpopular. The Reichstag will not accept it. The Reichstag, the parliament, will not accept what Brüning is doing. Brüning has no political support in the Reichstag. But hey, that's the joy of the Weimar Constitution. Hindenburg can make him Chancellor and allow him to stay as Chancellor. Therefore, Brüning rules by presidential decree. He goes to Hindenburg, says this is an emergency, and Hindenburg says I'll sign whatever you want. That, in many ways, realistically, is the moment democracy dies, or democracy loses most people. We have these harsh things being done in the name of democracy, but ironically by decree. Loads of people now hate democracy. Into this vacuum and this yearnings for stability and yearning for answers, the extremist parties surge in popularity. They've always been saying things, but now people are more willing to listen. Nazis have not changed their message. It's just that they are the best at getting their message across. The Nazis are very effective at communicating their message. The Nazis are flexible. The Nazis are uniformed. In comparison, the communists just seem like thugs. The communists take their orders from Russia. The communists are inflexible. Hitler says to the middle classes, well, you'd better vote for me then. As the communists grow in popularity, the middle class panic more, the middle class vote more and more for the Nazis. Hitler exploits the Great Depression better than anyone else, like Lenin exploited the misery of World War I and the provisional government's uselessness better than anyone else. Okay? So you have social and economic collapse as well. So you've got political chaos. Once the Nazis and the communists rise in numbers, there is no chance of the Reichstag ever being able to cooperate again. because now it is dominated by parties that oppose democracy fundamentally. So there's the irony. You have a democratic parliament dominated by undemocratic groups of people. Okay? Brüning was dumb to hold an election in 1930 thinking he could get an election. In 1932 there are more elections. There's the presidential election, which Hitler comes a close second to Hindenburg. In 1932 as well, you have two sets of Reichstag elections, the July and the November ones. The July elections, the Nazis reach their absolute peak, okay? Aided by the fact that in 1931, the 5 major German banks collapse, which makes the Mittelstand now poverty-stricken, okay? By November 1932, there is another election because von Papen has failed as Chancellor. Von Schleicher wants to be Chancellor. Nobody seems to be able to do anything. Von Papen's had a go. Von Schleicher's had a go. The Nazis' vote has gone down. And then von Papen does a political deal with Hindenburg and Hitler. Hitler can be Chancellor. Von Papen will be Vice-Chancellor. Job done, Hitler in power. Hitler needed that deal, his vote was going down. Von Papen needed that deal, nobody supported him. Hindenburg was manipulated into supporting that deal. But there was only a political deal because Hitler was worth doing a deal with. Hitler was only worth doing a deal with because he had loads of votes. Why did he have loads of votes? Because of the Great Depression. End of story. End of Weimar. Goodbye.